getting the advice well in advance, getting that pre-approval well in advance, learning more about what to look for when you're looking around a property, and also when to get a building inspection done.
Yes.
Those things can all matter when it comes to the actual auction date.
Absolutely.
And the success of actually bidding at auction.
Absolutely.
Hi, I'm Mehran Zareian.
I'm Glenn Stanley.
This is Property Espresso. Glenn.
G'day.
Good day.
How are you?
I'm marvellous.
Good.
How about yourself?
I'm marvellous as well. The sun is shining, the phone is ringing. What's not to be marvellous about?
Absolutely. It's been nearly a week since the OCR came down again.
Already. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed, and what a week, right? I mean, we sort of all knew what was probably going to happen and had plenty of time to prepare for it. But boy, oh boy, has it happened. The phone's ringing hot.
Yep.
Lots of renewed interest, people wanting to know what this means for their approvals. Does it mean that they can borrow more, for instance?
Right.
And of course, as is often the case when interest rates start to come down, a lot of people are now questioning whether their existing mortgage setup is right for them, or are they now overpaying?
Okay.
And in order to get out of it, what costs might there be? So yes, busy times.
So those people that took out a 5-year mortgage, fixed mortgage, years ago at that low rate, have they come off now?
Some are still enjoying rates in the threes,
Really?
but are about to experience what a lot of the rest of us have been experiencing for a while, in terms of that coming to an end and going up to whatever it is now. They will be comforted that there are still some rates available under 5% for some select terms. And furthermore, that rates are will continue to come down. There will be even better deals available in the near future. But anyone who's coming up right now and has been paying, low 4s or even under 4% for a while is going to encounter some degree of an increase here.
Yeah, and that sort of thing could quite affect the market and
Absolutely
what people are willing to pay for a property.
Absolutely will. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's quite interesting though, isn't it, that since even a week before the OCR announcement got made, a few of the banks started taking the punt and lowering their rates at 4.99% for 3 years.
That really caught a lot of us off guard. Yeah, absolutely. There's a few things at play here. Firstly, yes, the cost of funds. The OCR coming down, realistically, it lowers the cost that banks have to pay to borrow money, which they can then lend to us. So yes, it does reduce. It does reduce the need for high rates. However, there is also banks trying to balance their book. Bear in mind that if you were a bank and had lent, say, 60, 70, 80, 90% of your available loans to people who were fixing for no longer than, say, 6 months, you've got a really high concentration risk that a lot of those people can and therefore may refinance to other banks. You could lose that business at the end of 6 months. So on occasion, I've encountered banks over the years bringing out a headline special rate for a rather obscure term, one that wouldn't naturally appeal to many. We've been in an environment where we're advocating for 6 and 12-month, very short-term fixed rates.
Yep.
So when Westpac brought out a 3-year rate at 4.98, it caught everyone off guard.
Yep.
We would have loved it if it had been a 6-month rate. But it wasn't. It was 3 years. And so a lot of people were like, that's lovely, but I'm not going to take it because I think that there will be even better rates available in the short term. Others said, let's take part of our loan on that. I've settled a number of loans in the last 2 or 3 weeks with, say, a third of the borrowing fixed for 3 years.
Okay.
Should add that 3-year rate at 4.99 was removed. It's no longer available. Quickly as it came, it's been replaced with a 2-year rate at another bank at 4.99. But certainly this is just getting people thinking about, well, what is the long-term forecast here? Certainly Tony Alexander was advocating for that 3-year 4.99 rate. I've not seen any releases from him today that talk about the 2-year option.
Yeah.
But it has got us thinking slightly outside the square, where we're somewhat deviating from that 6-month focus.
I guess with the OCR coming down sequentially over the last year, the train of thought would be that the bank would automatically follow that. And I think they've been a bit cautious again, aren't they?
We've seen fairly typical behaviours from the banks. The OCR generally dictates the short-term fixed and floating interest rates, not so much those longer terms, which is why that 3-year offer was a bit of an enigma. This time round, no sooner had the Reserve Bank declared that they were going to cut by 50 basis points, we saw ASB and a number of other high street banks reduce their floating interest rates by the same amount, by 50 basis points, which was great to see the full reduction passed on to consumers. They haven't cut their fixed rates by that amount. They have cut their fixed rates by some, but there will be a period, as there often is, following the OCR announcement, where banks sort of vie for position. You take into consideration what I mentioned before about balancing books. You know, they're going to be looking at how much of our mortgage book is coming off in a year or 2 or 3, and potentially pricing their loans to appeal with that in mind. But one other thing that I've mentioned in previous videos with you, we've seen this time, test rates coming down. So I think I'm right in saying most, if not all, of the high street banks have, since last Wednesday, dropped their test rates. Test rate being the rate employed by a bank to ascertain how much someone can borrow. We've put this to the test. This time last week, someone who could borrow $100,000 based on their income could probably borrow today about $106,000. So there's been an increase of about 6%. That's been really nice to see, and again, we will continue, I think, to see that throughout 2025 as and when the cash rate slowly does make its way back down again. But yeah, what impact that is going to have overnight on activity remains to be seen. I often talk about the sentiment here, and the sentiment will definitely be improving.
It's odd that people are really, really influenced by media, and what they hear in the media influences their decisions, whether to buy, whether to take out a bigger loan. And I think there's a lot of mixture of media going on. Some weeks it's good, some weeks it's not so good. And I think people are getting a bit confused, to tell them the truth.
Rightly so. It's very difficult to generalize, and I think that's one of the problems that the media has, is that they'll talk about the market. Well, the market in, Ashburton is quite different to the market here in Long Bay. The market in Takapuna, Devonport, for instance, is very different to the market in Northcote, Sunnyside. And that's within Auckland's North Shore. So, is it fair for the media to talk about these numbers? I mean, the numbers are what the numbers are. The statistics, the data doesn't lie, but it can be misconstrued. And we all know that the media love catastrophizing. They're all about, FOMO and you must act now type thing. It can be creating a little bit of a storm in the teacup, I think. But that being said, certainly what I've experienced since last Wednesday is a marked increase in activity and interest. I think the pressure is going to be on from now.
Well, certainly, when you do look at the stats, you're right. You've got to look at the stats in the right way. For one thing, over the summer period, people have been away. The market traditionally is a bit slower anyway. So the stats that are coming out are over that period of time. So you can't really compare that with February, March, April time. I guess the other factor is, you're quite right, it does vary by suburb. And when you look at the prices, they haven't really gone up. However, the demand is starting to grow now that people are back off holiday. And when you look at how much price difference is between the suburbs, the rental yield for North Cross, for Otiha, and Northcote are the highest, particularly Northcote, because there's a lot of apartments that are being built in Northcote. And as a result, a lot of investors are buying those and renting them out. So it stands to reason. On the opposite side of the coin, because a lot of apartments have been selling, it does mean that the stats, the median, is skewed.
Absolutely.
As a result of it.
Absolutely.
A lot of those buyers are under $1 million. A lot of the first-time buyers are out there at the moment who all of a sudden have got this gain in confidence with seeing what's happening with the rates, and they're starting to act. And to me, that's a true indicator that the market is about to start picking up, because it's those first-time buyers that buy the properties and then allow those people to upsize,
to do the next.
or even move further up north.
Correct.
To Matakana, Warkworth Way, because it's normally a ripple effect going up there. And if people sell here, they'll move out.
Absolutely.
So there's a number of things happening at the moment, and I think it's always been that way, but you just need to read through the lines.
Well, I recall, I think it was in our last interview, Mehran, I talked about the golden days of down the viaduct, everyone sipping on Moet and Chandon with their Louis Vuitton handbags. We're still away from that yet.
That wasn't me.
It was. You don't need to hide your Louis Vuitton handbag from me. We're still away, I think, from that coming back now. People aren't spending for the sake of spending. We're at the tail end of the hard times still. And yes, it's a blurry line between that and the beginning of the good times, but I do think that most, myself included, I'm hoping to use this relief in the form of lowering interest rates to finish tidying up all the bits and pieces, paying off the debt that we've carried through the high interest rates. And only once that's kind of been put to bed can we actually go, right, now what fancy new sports car can I buy? So I don't think things like luxury items, boats and high-end handbags are going to see a massive resurgence overnight. But this is going to be the time that if I was in that industry, I'd probably start a few ad campaigns and to get people thinking. A number of applications that I've been working on of late are now sort of transforming, where people are saying, okay, well, now that interest rates are coming down, let's again consolidate those other bits and pieces with this to maximize what we can do for the next step. Whereas I think traditionally over the last couple of years, people have been happy to just focus on paying that debt down gradually. Now they go, well, why bother? Let's wrap it all up and start with a clean slate now. Try and get ahead of the curve.
You're right. It has been a long process, isn't it? From the start to finish. And we haven't finished yet. However, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I think a lot of people can as well. Last year, Tony Alexander's line was survive till 25.
Yes.
My catch line this year is keep the smile alive in 25, because I think you need to keep positive and keep looking forward to what could happen going forward.
Absolutely.
And things are happening internationally that could affect what happens in New Zealand. However, there are positives as well. I heard through somebody the other day that a lot of those medical staff that have upped and gone to Australia or left the country, those posts are now being filled by a lot of American people that are coming into the country. So that in itself explains a lot with what's going on.
Yes, in the States, absolutely.
However, with every tragedy, there's an opportunity, and I think we need to be looking at those opportunities in 2012 going forward.
Absolutely. I mean, I'd say some 10, 15 years ago, New Zealand was much more, New Zealand's economy was more at the whim of Australia and international factors than it is now. I used to say that we were nothing more than a compass floating about in this sea that's being buffeted by these international markets. Through COVID and our response, we sort of deviated from that path somewhat. It used to be that you could look at what the Australian Reserve Bank did on the Tuesday and expect that we'd see the same thing happen with our cash rate. If they cut, we cut. That stopped happening. And so one of the conversations we've been having in the office around that international turmoil, I don't know what you'd call it, but you know, particularly in the States, how is that going to affect things here? I'd like to think not as much as it would have 10 years ago. It will still have a bearing. This is America, after all, we're talking about. But it's not going to have such an immediate and you know, interlinked effect on our interest rates and what we do. Banks here are largely Australian owned. Australian market is subdued because they've got higher interest rates. I would imagine that our Australian parent banks are going to be actively thinking, how can we capitalise on the situation here in New Zealand to tide them over until they start to see the relief that we've been enjoying for a little while now.
I think Australia is a different market, and
Absolutely.
you know, the Australian market fluctuates a little bit more. I think we've been a bit more cautious here, and because the OCR has been reduced gradually, we're seeing gradual improvements and things. Whereas in Australia, you get cycle going up, and then all of a sudden it starts to come down again, and that's the worst thing that can happen in New Zealand. You get that up-down feeling. And I think going forward, we have reached that bottom of the cycle.
Hope so.
I'm quite certain of it. And I think people have got their heads around the prices of properties at the moment, because for a while, 2021 dominated the thoughts of everybody. And I've done a few appraisals in the last few weeks, and people that bought in 2021 trying to recoup their costs, it's very doubtful they're going to get the same price now that they paid for a property in 2021.
That's right.
I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's doubtful. And I think you need to give people the right information to help them decide whether they are going to sell now or hold on until they do reach that point.
Absolutely right. It is a question that I'm asked a lot, and unfortunately there is no sort of off-the-shelf answer. The answer, the whether it is advisable or not, can only be determined in the future.
That's right.
We don't know, but I'll often say to my clients, look, it's kind of like filling up your car or putting $20 of gas in. The price at the pump is the price at the pump. You might get it cheaper a couple of pumps down the road, but you know, by and large, you're going to be paying what you're going to be paying. The question is, do you fill her up, or do you just buy enough to get you to the next stop? I do think that we're going to see fewer and fewer houses selling for a loss until that sort of finally turns, and we start to see pretty much more and more houses selling for a profit. But isn't it funny, one of the first things that you and I spoke about today was how dangerous it is to generalise, and yet here we are generalising about Australian versus New Zealand. It really is impossible. New builds are completely different to existing properties. Properties with minor dwellings and home and incomes, they certainly have a lot of appeal, and I'm picking up a lot more inquiry in that regard than perhaps I was 2 years or so ago. It's very, very difficult to crystal ball, predict what the future holds. But I think, again, coming back to that sentiment, things are getting better. We can see, we can touch them getting better now, and with increased confidence that they're going to continue to get better. I think that's really what we've been missing here. Yep. So it may not change how much someone can buy or sell for overnight, but it's got them more actively thinking about that, and that is going to, in turn, just generate more activity.
Yeah. I think we need some stimulus, and I think part of that stimulus is already coming through media that talk of the government looking at reviewing the Overseas Investment Act, and Between you and me, what would happen if they opened it up again? Would we get another 2015-16 happening again?
If they opened it up, I can't see how we wouldn't. I think that since, again, coming back to the COVID response, I think that really flung New Zealand onto the world stage. And, you know, when America voted the time before last, or the time before last, we saw a lot of inquiries of people wanting to come and live here in America. We're seeing that again now. I think we're going to see a bit of a crazy response if we do open the floodgates. I think I'd be surprised if we did fully open them, but it might be a little bit early to tell in that regard.
I think I might have mentioned to you the last time that whenever I list properties, I promote it in Auckland, Sydney and Singapore.
Yes.
I'm still getting a lot of hits and a lot of people viewing and clicking from Singapore. I'd say it's probably about 6 times the number that I would get from anywhere else. And it does make me wonder, are those people seriously looking to either come back or looking to buy an investment property here and they're just waiting for the right opportunity?
Waiting for the time to be right.
And this is the right opportunity. I think if anybody's looking to invest at the moment, this is the right time to do it.
Yeah, you can't forget either that, you know, we're still gradually re-implementing tax deductibility for interest costs on rental properties. You know, they were gone for a number of years, and I certainly saw a whole swathe of former investors going, I don't want a part of this anymore, I'm getting out, there's not enough in it for me anymore. They're all coming back. They're all coming back. You know, lower interest rates and that additional deductibility of your mortgage costs, that's a tax deductible expense, really generate more appeal, making properties which 6-12 months ago wouldn't have washed their own face suddenly much more viable. And again, I think the key here is not to wait, not for buyers to wait until it does wash its own face and it does make sense, but almost picking the time where it doesn't quite, but you know that it's going to, so you can just get ahead of that curve, because by the time it makes sense, you can bet you're going to be up against a dozen other bidders.
Right. It's too late.
If you can beat them just by having that, hopefully, well-grounded confidence in what lies ahead. I mean, again, notwithstanding, there could be other external shocks that we're not, we have no idea of. There's talk about another COVID thing taking place in China right now. I mean, something like that could have the power to absolutely derail things, but all going well, and what we know, what we can tangibly grasp right now, dictates a pretty good run for a while.
Yeah. I agree with you, and I think going forward, 2025, I think is the year for a turning point. And I think that if people have been waiting, as I mentioned to you, it takes about 6 weeks for those results to enter into the Land Information New Zealand system, be made to the public. So by the time it's already happened and you wait 6 weeks, you've missed the boat.
Absolutely. Yep. Certainly I plan to frequent more auction rooms. I want to reacquaint myself with the activities that take place. I can remember years and years ago when it was just it was a bidding war. You know, people would be out there, just it was chaos, and then it all but vanished. It seems like it's starting back up again. I do feel for the first home buyers out there who are often, you know, tasked with learning how to bid at auction. The first time they ever buy a house, that's got to be stressful for them, and I do feel for them.
I think that's the important thing, that if people are thinking of buying, then getting the advice well in advance, getting that pre-approval well in advance, learning more about what to look for when you're looking around a property, and also when to get a building inspection done.
Yes.
Those things can all matter when it comes to the actual auction date.
Absolutely.
And the success of actually bidding at auction.
Absolutely.
So you're quite right. Go and visit the auction room, get a feel for it. Speak to a salesperson that you might know. Speak to a mortgage broker that you might know. And from that aspect, get yourself knowledgeable so that on the day you're going to be more effective.
I think you're absolutely right. I think a lot of, particularly first home buyers or guys who don't know what they don't know, will start looking at houses without really understanding whether they're in that bracket or not. They may go to generic affordability calculators, even bank websites, and try to ascertain how much they can borrow, but not really realizing that ABC Bank will absolutely lend them a different amount to XYZ Bank. All the banks will lend people different amounts of money, and so without that sort of overarching, we're here to help you as buyers work out which bank is right for you, put the applications together. All too often, as I've encountered this morning, I get a bunch of phone calls on the Monday from new prospective buyers who were out on the weekend looking at open homes, and they found one that goes to auction tomorrow. We don't have that sort of time to get that approved. We can get you pre-approved. The process takes about a week, maybe up to 2 weeks if it's slightly more complicated. But let's get you pre-approved before you start finding the house of your dreams, rather than being stuck behind the 8 ball and trying to chase
I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
And if an auction isn't successful, a lot of properties are going to a multiple offer afterwards.
Indeed they are.
It's the worst place to be in because you're throwing darts in the dark, literally.
Absolutely.
You don't know what the other person's offering. So you're better off being in an auction room and seeing what the other person's offering and seeing how far they're willing to go.
Totally.
And actually mastering how you're going to bid.
Yeah, there's absolutely strategies. I mean, it is what it is. Auctions, rightly or wrongly, do make up a large chunk of of house sales here in New Zealand. I think there's a body of thought out there that just says, I'm not going to participate, I'm going to hope that it doesn't sell, and then maybe be one of those people presenting in that multi-offer situation. I think with the right advice and guidance, we can actually help people to work out how to use the auction process to their advantage. It's not to say you're going to end up paying too much for the house, but just knowing what it means and knowing, strategies and what at a minimum we need to do prior to the auction. What's going to happen if the reserve isn't met? How can we use that to your advantage?
Yes,
you won't get that type of advice from your bank.
No, that's right.
You just can't.
And I guess from that aspect as well, going through a broker like yourself, you're going to be able to test the water with several banks at the same time.
Absolutely.
Whereas if you go to one bank and you get turned down by that bank for any particular reason, the other bank knows about it.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. Look, I see it all the time. People bank with ABC Bank. They want to bank with ABC Bank. They went to ABC Bank and ABC Bank said no, and they don't understand why. We'll have a look and say, well, it's obvious why. They were never going to do it. Whatever the reason, but this bank and this bank or this bank might. So let's, if we were to start with a clean slate, I never would have even gone to the existing bank in certain cases. There's no pre-prescribed formula. It's not that if your name ends in a Y, you should go to that bank. There's a lot more to it than that. And until we've got all the information, we can't work out which one's going to be the right one.
So we meet again in a few weeks' time after the next OCR.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on what's going to happen in the next 6 weeks?
I think we're going to be talking about a much greater volume of sales and activity than we've been talking about now. I think you're absolutely right. We've had long weekends and summertime, and people have been away and they're back, and they were away again and now they're back, and it's been a rocky ride over January, February, but I think we're now almost at a turning point. Last week's OCR announcement gave more fuel to the fire that was ignited just at the end of last year with that OCR coming down. It's reaffirmed what we already knew, that rates are on their way down and will continue unless there's an external shock to continue coming down. And I think people are going to get off their hands and actually start visiting open homes, putting pen to paper and getting offers out there.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And already we're seeing more numbers at open homes. We're seeing people that haven't taken action for a long time, and all of a sudden they're starting to take action, which signals to me that that's the start of something happening towards something bigger going into the year. I'm not sure what's going to happen going into winter, because there hasn't been a stalling of the market really. It's taken time to pick up. But I would imagine going into winter it's going to carry on. I can't see that slowing down much.
I mean, winter is naturally a subdued season, but the last few winters have been unnaturally subdued as well with these higher interest rates. This will be the first one that we're going into with a little bit of optimism on a fiscal level.
Yes.
And it will be interesting to see how that translates. I honestly don't know. I don't know, but I can assure you the banks are eager to write some business. We're all eager to help. I think the message in 6 weeks' time will be quite different to the message which we've almost reiterated the last few chats we've had.
Yes, yeah, I completely agree with you. As far as the market, we haven't got a crystal ball. All we can just do is look at the facts, look at what the opportunities are going forward.
Indeed.
And keep planning forward, and that's the key thing. Be ready. Be ready to bid if it's an auction. Be ready to present that offer. Have a offer from the bank that you can actually spend a certain amount and get all your ducks in a row pretty much.
Listen, it costs you nothing to do.
No.
You're really doing yourself a disservice if you don't do the homework prior.
And even if you're using KiwiSaver, you need to understand how that works and how the release of deposit works and all of that.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
Just have a chat with Glenn if you're interested in knowing a bit more about the finance side, and give me a call if you're interested in either selling or buying property going forward, or just for a coffee.
We love coffee.
Yeah. Thanks, Glenn.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you as always, Mehran.
Absolutely. Same here. See you next time.
Cheers.
Bye.